Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, honorable members of the Parliament, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. My name is Osai Ojigo. I'm the Country Director of Amnesty International, Nigeria. Amnesty International is a human rights organization established in 1961. Since its inception, Amnesty International has carried out research, campaigns, and advocacy across the world. Our investigations have exposed several human rights violations and abuses in several countries. We welcome this opportunity to address the ECOWAS Parliament on the occasion of its first ordinary session in June 2022. The human rights situation in ECOWAS countries varies from one country to another. However, despite these disparities, cross-cutting issues can help understand the pressing needs for human rights protection in the region. The situation can be grouped under 4 headings. 1, persistence of conflict situations and the insecurity of populations. 2, violations of economic and social rights. 3, discrimination and gender-based violence. 4, restriction of civic space. The persistence of conflict situations and the insecurity of populations. In many ECOWAS countries, they face conflict situations marked by serious human rights violations which can, in certain cases, amount to crimes of international law. Civilians are the main victims of the conflicts. In Mali, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, and Niger, armed groups launch regular attacks on villages, killing people, burning properties, and looting goods. More than 600 civilians were killed in Mali in 2021. More than 300 people were killed in the Tillaberi and Tahua regions in Niger by alleged members of the Islamic states in the Grand Sahara in 2021 first quarter. In June 2021 in Burkina Faso, at least 132 people were killed in the attack of a town of Solan by an unidentified armed group. In Burkina Faso, the Group for the Support of Islam and Muslims blockaded Mansilla town, Yaha province, causing food insecurity among the population. In Mali, GSIM blockaded many villages and communities, restraining villagers' free movement and access to farmland and water to force them to cease collaboration with the army. In Nigeria, the armed groups Boko Haram and the Islamic State of West Africa Province, ISWAP, ambushed, killed, and injured many members of Nigeria's secret forces. At least 31 soldiers were killed by ISWAP on 26 April 2021 in Manok, Borno State. Intercommunal violence, mostly between herders and farming communities, as well as attacks by bandits, escalated, resulting in more than 3,494 deaths and thousands of displacements. Over 5,000 people, including foreign nationals working on quarry sites, were abducted for ransom by bandits and other gunmen. More than 93 people were killed on 12 June by gunmen who attacked Kadawa village in Somi local government area, Zamfara State. Recently, on the 22nd of May 2022, at least 45 people in Ran in Borno State were killed by Boko Haram when they invaded farms. At least 855 students were abducted from their schools for ransoms in 7 states in 10 separate attacks. About 65 Abuja Kaduna inbound train passengers were abducted in March 2022, which left at least 8 people dead. Recently, in June 2022, 11 were released, but about 50 remain in captivity. Amnesty International and other international NGOs also reported unlawful killings and unforced disappearances committed by members of national armed forces and their allies during military operations in the last years. Between 27 and 31st March 2022, operations carried out in Mura by the Malian armed forces targeting armed groups reportedly resulted in the death of many civilians. Some survivors allege the army was accompanied by mercenaries of the Russian security agency, Wagner. The UN also requested a judicial investigation into alleged violations of international humanitarian law when French military airstrikes killed many civilians in 2021 in Bounty. In Nigeria on 15 September 2021, 9 people were killed and several injured during a military airstrike in Buhari village, Yunusari local government area of Yobe State. The military said it had hit the village accidentally. Impunity for conflict-related crimes remained the rule. In Burkina Faso, no significant progress had been made in the investigation into the unlawful killing of 50 people and the enforced disappearance of 66 others, allegedly committed by the armed group in the village of Yugu in January 2019. The Burkinabe government established in 2021 the Special Forces, whose mandate included counter-terrorism operations, amongst other tasks. The decree establishing the unit states that Special Forces cannot be pursued before the courts for any actions taken during these operations. In our April report, Crimes Without Convictions, Analysis of the Judicial Response to Conflict-Related Crimes in Central Mali, Amnesty International concluded that despite repeated commitments on the part of the Malian authorities, a number of judicial investigations, such as those into the Ogosago situation where 157 people were killed in March 2019 and 35 in February 2020, and several others, little progress has been made, and victims continue to demand justice while fearing reprisal in the absence of protection measures. The military justice system still exercises its jurisdiction over crimes committed against civilians by military personnel in operations which is in contradiction with the principles and guidelines on the right to a fair trial and legal assistance in Africa of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights. The principles provide that military courts should only hear cases relating purely to military offenses and not crimes committed by civilians. At a time when investigations into crimes suffered by the population in the center of the country are stalled, the Malian authorities are expediting legal proceedings for acts allegedly perpetrated in those very same regions for terrorism. In October 2021, the Malian authorities held a special trial session during which 47 cases were heard. Some of these proceedings are marred by serious violations of the rights of the accused, who are detained incommunicado by the General State Security Directorate, sometimes without charge, and possibly suffering torture or other ill treatment for weeks or months before being sent to trial. Most recently, 132 civilians were killed in a commune in Mali between 18 and 19 June, and 86 were killed in a similar situation in Burkina Faso between 11 and 12 June 2022. This is in Seitanga. Therefore, the region is facing new and unresolved conflicts with warring parties violating international human rights and international humanitarian law. There's large displacement of people, thousands have been killed and hundreds subjected to sexual violence, and further weakening of the already fragile healthcare and economic systems. Economic and social rights. Conflict situations also shed a light on a very important cross-cutting human rights issue in the region. Conflict situations generate humanitarian crises. More than 1.5 million people are forcibly displaced due to insecurity in Burkina Faso, 400,000 in Mali, 300,000 in Niger. Populations are deprived of their basic rights to food and health. Thousands of schools are closed due to insecurity, depriving the new generation of their right to education. Since the beginning of the conflict in Burkina Faso, more than 2,682 schools had been closed. By May 2021, 304,564 students were affected by these closures. Of that number, 148,046 were girls. Violations of economic and social rights are not only related to conflicts, but also the result of austerity policies, corruption, and a lack of political voluntarism at the national and international levels. The COVID-19 pandemic, but also malaria, the resurgence of measles in some regions have highlighted the chronic lack of investment by countries in the region in the health sector. Health facilities are often not available, accessible, and of high quality. The right to housing has also been violated in many countries in the region, including through forced evictions of people to facilitate business activity or infrastructure development. Evictions occur often without discussion with the persons concerned, without prior notification, without prospect of relocation, and without adequate compensation. Forced evictions continue unabated in Nigeria, and justice is elusive for hundreds of thousands of evictees. 5 years after a high court declared the forced evictions of Otodo-Gbame community in Nigeria illegal, the authorities are yet to abide by the judgment and provide shelter for the evictees. Our report, The Human Cost of a Mega City, Forced Evictions of the Urban Poor in Lagos, Nigeria, documents 7 forced evictions of more than 30,000 residents of Ilubirin and Otodo-Gbame waterfront communities in Lagos State, Nigeria, between 19 March 2016 and 22 April 2017. In July 2021, the Nigerian authorities demolished 400 homes in Ido-Saki community in Abuja. About 1,500 persons were displaced when bulldozers brought down their homes in Impape area of Abuja in August 2021. Similarly, in January 2022, nearly 2,000 people in Elechi Phase 1 waterfront community in Port Harcourt have been displaced from their homes, and tens of thousands of people in 15 neighboring communities are under imminent threat of forced evictions. The demolitions not only violated people's right to adequate housing, but also negatively impacted their livelihoods. Violations of the right to education, health, and housing added to poverty and unemployment continue to push some young people to want to migrate to Europe by taking ever more dangerous paths at the risk of their lives. The third human rights issue in the region that emerges from a cost-cutting analysis is gender-based discrimination and violence. Gender-based discrimination and violence remain a major concern in the world and in the region. Discriminatory laws and practices on inheritance, marriage, divorce, etc. exist in many countries, and reform projects are often blocked by conservative movements. Women and girls are at risk of sexual violence disproportionately. Other issues documented include harmful practices such as female genital mutilation, early and forced marriage, limited access to sexual and reproductive health services and information, and the exclusion of pregnant girls from schools. Cases of rape, especially of young girls, have made headlines and have created a shock among the population. Efforts made by some authorities in the region to tackle this issue must be reinforced to strengthen prevention, ensure protection for survivors, and to end impunity. LGBTI people also continue to face discrimination and violence. Homosexuality is still criminalized in several countries in the region. LGBTI people are fleeing their country because of threats and associations and prevented from doing their work to promote and protect rights. In Sierra Leone, the government rescinded the ban on pregnant schoolgirls attending mainstream schools in 2020, following the decision of the ECOWAS court in Waves versus Sierra Leone, declaring such policy as discriminatory and a violation of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights and other international law instruments. Nigeria is yet to pay the damages awarded in 2017 by the ECOWAS court in Dorothy Injemanze versus Nigeria, in favor of 3 women who suffered gender-based violence and discrimination from state security agents. Despite the authorities' and NGOs' efforts in recent years to promote access to justice for survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, bureaucracy, stigma, and the practice of negotiating out-of-court settlements between the suspected perpetrator and the victim continue to hinder prosecutions. Finally, a fourth issue in the region that also echoes a global trend is that of restriction of civic space. Human rights defenders, journalists, activists, bloggers, members of the political opposition speak out and protest.
Essayez de résumer ce point, s'il vous plaît.
Try to summarize, please. Try to summarize.
I continue? Okay. Human rights defenders continue to face challenges as a result of their dissent. States to denounce insecurity, arbitrary arrests, corruption, rising prices of basic necessities, non-payment of salaries in the administration. But instead of addressing concerns, the authorities have continued to restrict freedom of expression and peaceful assembly. Demonstrations continue to be banned in many ECOWAS countries under false pretexts related to security or public health. On 13th May 2022, the Guinean military regime prohibited all political demonstrations in total violation of national and international human rights law. The ban on gatherings of more than 15 people as part of restrictions to fight against COVID-19 is still in place in Togo. In the last year, police forces have used excessive force to suppress protests in Senegal, Benin, Chad, Ghana, Nigeria, Guinea, and Sierra Leone, killing several protesters. Dozens of protesters were killed in 2019-2020 in Guinea. In several countries, cybercrime laws have been used to circumvent press laws and criminalize the opinions expressed by certain people via social networks or online. Internet disruptions and shutdowns and suspension of social media were recorded in Burkina Faso, Niger, Nigeria, and Senegal in order to hinder the mobilization of people. Mobilizing for the protection of human rights, therefore, remains a perilous exercise in the region. However, this mobilization has been effective and contributes to recent many positive impacts, such as the abolition of the death penalty in Sierra Leone, the release of many people arbitrarily arrested for simply exercising their right to freedom of expression, as in Côte d'Ivoire and Guinea, the decision by the ECOWAS Court of Justice to condemn a decree taken 10 years ago in Senegal banning all demonstrations for political motives in a specific district of Dakar, the opening of a judicial investigation in Mali against the commander of Fossat for the bloody repression of demonstrations from May to July 2020, and the lifting of the Twitter ban in Nigeria. Amnesty International is a movement of 10 million people which mobilizes the humanity in everyone and campaigns for change so that we can all enjoy our rights. We believe that acting in solidarity and compassion with people everywhere can change our societies for better. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Madam. We would like to invite the representative of HURIDAC to come and take the floor.
parole.
Have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, members of Parliament, Your Excellencies, all protocols duly observed. My name is Adiole Kingsley, the program lead for HURIDAC. HURIDAC stands for Human Rights Advancement, Development and Advocacy Center. As we all know, human rights is a foremost instrument that determines how we live and exist as citizens, not only in West Africa, but the world at large. Human rights is already a key issue facing West Africa, just as my friend, Director of Amnesty International did buttress. There is need for advocacy in human rights to protect the rights of citizens across West Africa. And this is why advocacy should be organized and strategic if we must improve the human rights situation in West Africa. Next slide. Why advocacy and what does it involve? Advocacy for human rights involve documentation of violations, human rights abuses to citizens in West Africa, and being able to provide solutions and remedies to tackle these inherent violations that have occurred over time in our continent as well as West Africa. So it's very, very important for us to understand that violations, human rights abuses, they destroy the policies, they destroy and affect the reasons why we exist as humans and as citizens. So if we are able to document these violations and proffer remedies to relevant stakeholders who are so-called stakeholders that can assist to ensure that the human rights situations are improved, then we can beat our chest and say we are doing better in West Africa. Also, it's very important for us to understand that there needs to be equity, social justice spread across for citizens to be able to claim their rights and be able to lend or give a voice whenever there is a violation in any of the West African countries. Aside that, there is also a need to understand that we need to recognize self-advocacy for each citizen living across West Africa, whether you are from that country or not. The right of that citizen should, and as a matter of urgency, be protected. We will talk about legal mechanisms in West Africa. There are legal mechanisms in West Africa which must be followed. There is the principle of the VPR, which is violation, perpetrators, and remedy. Where there is no law, then what do we stand to protect? Where there is no right, then what do we stand to protect? It is very important for us to understand that there are treaties which have been codified. These treaties have been codified in the form of what we see today as the UN treaties, the AU treaties, the ECOWAS treaties, and also, though the national constitutions are not treaties in themselves, but they are laws that guide the mechanisms, the legal mechanisms that as citizens must be protected. But the truth remains that as at today, most of these laws, they are not obeyed. They are not taken for what it is. Treaties have been ratified, they have been signed, but how many of the countries in West Africa are actually implementing them? That is a serious concern for us, even as we look at the issues that face are the West African countries. So for us, we're trying to look at mechanisms that can ensure that the rights of citizens are fully adhered to. And if we look at some of the UN treaties, we can't list them enough. We have binding treaties like the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. We have that of the economic, social, and cultural rights, the elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. The list is endless, even as we can see on the slide. But what our concern is drawn to the fact that we know that there are committees which are ensuring that these treaty-based bodies of the UN, treaty-based bodies, treaties of the AU, that the African Union and the ECOWAS are followed and obeyed. But despite the best efforts of these committees, the truth is that across our West African countries, the issues are still lying there for us, facing us in the face. How many of these violations have been reported? And citizens do report, but where do they report to? Who do they report to? There is need for urgent action in terms of advocacy. There are various institutional mechanisms of the AU, of the UN, of the ECOWAS, and the national institutions and mechanisms that are put in place. But today, we find out that citizens are yet to embrace these mechanisms by which they can be able to claim their rights or report violations, or who exactly do they go to if they must report a violation. Amnesty International just read out some few statistics for us, but you find out that some of these abuses, they keep going on and on across West Africa. Little or nothing is being done to fight against these things. So it is now left for us to create that awareness, that mechanism, to ensure that people, citizens, can actually approach the ICC. Citizens can actually approach the African Court of Justice. Citizens can be able to approach, to make use of the African Charter that have been instituted even before now, to ensure that their rights are enforced and protected. How can we operationalize this even today? We'll find out that, most importantly, the national constitutions, some of the constitutions do enshrine mechanisms that support human rights. But it's very unfortunate to report that most of these mechanisms are not enforced. Sometimes you get to report and you're being chased here and there. Sometimes you get to report and it's like it's falling on deaf ears. Who actually should the citizens go to report their issues? Definitely, if we look across the West African countries, you can slide for me, sir. If we look at, go ahead. Go on. If we look at the chart that is before us, we presented a report sometime 2021, and we found out that Mali and Benin are actually, they seem to be the most friendly human rights environment based on a minimalist approach, not from the political approach. But it doesn't take away the fact that more needs to be done. It's not really about naming or shaming any West African country, but to see how the rights of citizens can be protected by ensuring that all stakeholders, just as we are in the parliament today, look at how mechanisms, ways, efforts, strategies that can ensure that the rights of citizens are protected. How can we advocate for our citizens in West Africa? There can be one way. One way is technical support. As an organization, we're looking at how we can engage with other West African countries. If every West African country have that technical support where the violations are reported, abuses are reported, and it is being looked into, having a database that can also be able to carry out a holistic approach, verify violations and abuses, and work and discuss with relevant institutions and in the countries where they are, and see how they can provide support to improve the human rights situations in their country. Also, the database can assist to ensure that nobody, no country, no West African country will be blamed as per why are there violations in their countries, but to look at why these things exist and approach it from a thematic context peculiar to each of these countries and see how they can be addressed. There are reports of extrajudicial killings, there are unlawful killings, there are violations to women and children, their rights are not being protected. There are vulnerable groups across West Africa. But how can we bring these things together? There must be, we have a fact sheet that can help to document addresses, organizations that are looking into issues of human rights. When a citizen's right is being violated, who does he run to? Which organization, which agency does he look into? In as much as we have the systems in place of the UN, the ECOWAS, the AU, and the national constitution, we are also looking at how citizens can easily be able to reach out where they have challenges. And it is one of our plea at this time to say that it is very important that the advocacy strategy that we would apply in the region would be one that can be all-encompassing, all-accommodating, to ensure that whatsoever be the violation in whichever West African country it occurs, there should be some kind of standing up tall to the order, to call state actors to order and make them understand that there is need. Wherever that violation has occurred, it must be tackled. The data that we have must, as a matter of fact, be something that people can hold on to and say, yes, if I am a citizen of Nigeria, for example, I must be able to tell myself that no matter where the violation occurred, if I report it, I would have an opportunity to have a say. That is why there is need for us to advocate. Outside that, across West Africa, stakeholders, all stakeholders, both government, agencies, like here this evening, we should all work together to ensure that we are not naming or shaming any West African country, but to see how we can work together to ensure that every voice that speaks, whether it be a violation that occurred or an abuse, would have an opportunity to present his or her voice wherever it is in West Africa. Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you, the representative of HURIDAC. We are giving the floor to the representative of WABA, Association of the West African Bar. WABA, you have the floor, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Honorable members of the Parliament, representatives of member states of ECOWAS here present, my brothers and sisters from the civil society organizations, the media, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the privilege, the honor of representing the West African Bar Association at this ordinary session of the Parliament. My name is Obiageli Oraka Oyifore. I'm the Programs Director and also the Head of Secretariat for the West African Bar Association. I'm presenting on the unconstitutional change of government in West Africa. and the implications for human rights of ECOWAS citizens. You will agree with me that the past 22 months have been quite turbulent for democracy in West Africa. Military leaders have toppled the governments of Mali, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. A similar attempt to overturn the democratic government of Guinea-Bissau was averted. These nations are all members of ECOWAS. An ECOWAS protocol on democracy and good governance created an accountability framework for governance. It aims to ensure free, fair, and credible elections as the basis for legitimate government. The protocol requires state parties to strengthen democratic institutions, the rule of law, human rights, and independent electoral systems. In addition to this, the protocol proposes developing a constitutional state based on the rule of law and common principles of good governance. But despite the broad objectives that signatories to this framework has assented to, ECOWAS states continue to grapple with incidences of illegitimate governments via coup d'etat. This is a dangerous trend in West Africa because most states in West Africa are grappling with similar geopolitical issues, such as bad governance, political tensions, public discontentment, religious and ethnic conflicts, tensions, poverty, minority agitations, and armed militia. You can even say terrorism. The failed coup attempt in Guinea-Bissau is a clear warning that the sub-region is faced with imminent danger, and ECOWAS and its member states must come up with a roadmap of actions to nip this retrogressive phenomenon in the bud. According to ECOWAS chairperson, President Nana Akufo-Addo, during the extraordinary summit of the heads of state in Accra in February 2022, the Malian coup created a contagion or domino effect in the region, establishing a pernicious trend. COVID-19 pandemic has also escalated the already dangers as harsh economic conditions continues to be a threat to fragile peace and security, and provides enabling environment for ambitious military leaders to hijack power. ECOWAS, concerned about the resurgence of military regimes in the region, suspended these member states and also imposed sanctions to check this trend. The authority of heads of states at the summit resonated their stance for zero tolerance for ascension of power through unconstitutional means. African Union, Peace and Security Council also endorsed all these sanctions by the ECOWAS against these defaulting countries. Unconstitutional change of government is unacceptable and must be quelled by all means. ECOWAS must not relent. Unconstitutional change of government is unacceptable. The human rights implications for citizens under junta regimes are unpalatable, and the economic sanctions from regional bodies have occasioned even greater hardships for the already impoverished regions. This paper will look at these human rights situations and discuss ways forward towards containment of this menace. The situation in Mali, like most of us know, but for purposes of my presentation, Mali was the first ECOWAS state to experience coup in the recent times. This happened in August 2020, when the army overthrew the government of President Keita, following many accusations of corruption, poor administration, poor response to the jihad menace in northern Mali. The Tuareg army rebellion, which started in 2012, metamorphosed into military groups with affiliation to Al-Qaeda and ISIL. By May 2021, the country witnessed another coup, led by Colonel Assimi Goïta. The colonel accused President Ndor and Prime Minister Kwame of not carrying the military along. ECOWAS suspended Mali and imposed economic sanctions and border closures. Other international bodies such as the EU also imposed sanctions against Mali. But notwithstanding the international condemnations and all the diplomatic missions to have Mali back to a constitutional state, the military junta is still in absolute control of the Malian government, and no date is in sight for elections. We can't trust that 36 months. We know that. Cases of human rights